Hello, everyone. I am Ronnie.
Good morning, and I am Jenny, and we are the Heart and Soul Sisters.
We are the Heart and Soul Sisters. How did I know to take a beat and let you say it? We must
I
be
don't know,
sharing the
because we're
same
like
brain
sharing
today.
the same brain.
We never worked that out in advance, which we probably should.
Yeah.
So we don't step all over each other. Yeah, we're still not super great at this. Oh
No, we
well.
just go with how it feels, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Follow our instinct, that
Yes. Yes.
intuition.
Um, yeah, which is a good thing. It's a good
Hmm.
thing for us to be living that way. It's a new experience, a good experience.
Hmm.
So today we're actually continuing to talk about Oprah's work because we both had a chance to listen to What Happened to You, which
Hmm.
is a phenomenal reframing of childhood trauma, or you can even think about it as childhood behavior problems, right? That whenever children are struggling, like if there are behavior problems they're having in school, or they're acting up at home, or they're you know, not doing their work, or they're hitting other kids, or what they're doing something that's not good that you want them to stop doing, right? We adults say, "What's the matter with you?" Or as our father used to say, "What the hell's the matter with you?"
Right.
And what Oprah says is the question you should be asking is, "What happened to you?"
Hmm.
And so that's the name of the book she wrote with Dr. Bruce Lipton, who apparently she's been working with since the 90s, maybe even the late 80s. I think she reached out to him, she said in her series, The Me You Cannot
Actually, I
See.
think that's Dr. Bruce Perry.
Ah, shoot. I'm thinking of Lipton, the biology of belief guy. You're right. Bruce Perry.
Right,
Thank
right,
you.
right.
Thank you. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, I'm going to have to say just any old name that comes into my head.
That's
Oh my
okay.
gosh. Yeah, poor
We're
Carla
all
McLaren
human.
became Karen McLaren when we talked about the emotion code. Manischewitz, thank God you're here to save me. Bruce
Yeah, we're all
Perry, Bruce Lipton is
Bruce,
biology of
Dr.
belief,
Bruce
who we haven't
Perry. He's
talked
awesome.
about. We maybe
No, we
needs to
haven't.
be one in this series. Okay, sorry,
That's
Doctor.
all right.
But yeah, the question is, what happened to you? Like
What a great question.
it is a great question, and it's definitely less accusatory, and it certainly
Oh
puts
my
the onus
gosh.
on somebody else, right? Like
Yeah.
something happened to you, somebody did something to you, there was something going on in your environment, something out of your
Right.
control that's now manifesting itself in this way that is problematic. For you, for the people around you. You're not living your optimal life. You're not functioning in an optimal way, and so it's about childhood trauma, um, primarily, but other things as well. And yeah, it was great. I mean, I absolutely loved it. I know I said I would throw it to you to share your thoughts first today. So I'm going to stop talking now. This is me not talking.
Oh gosh, I love you.
I love you too.
It's the scholar and the teacher in you, and I love that about you. And so I have no issues at all about you going first, girl.
No, no, no. That's right.
Setting
That's
it
right.
up.
This is me stopping. I'm stopping. You go ahead. You go ahead.
It is because I'm, I feel like I'm going in with the feels.
That's
It's
fine.
all
That's
about
totally
it's
fine.
all about the feels for me. And there were so many beautiful moments in this book, little ahas, as I'm listening to the stories of some of Dr. Perry's children that he's worked with, some of their experiences, Oprah's very beautiful, authentic, transparent self sharing, her experiences,
Right.
and it was just wow, awe-inspiring. It's another book I'll be listening to again. There's just so much in these books, but looking at how many of our children in our society are diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, and we hang mental health diagnoses on them, and that we're missing the boat It's their adverse childhood experiences. It's the trauma that they experienced as an infant.
Right.
Um, some of these kids that were in multiple foster homes before the age of 2
Right.
that never had an opportunity to bond and attach. And we wonder why they, are having night terrors and temper tantrums and meltdowns. And it's because they are dysregulated.
Yeah.
They don't know what connection is, let alone self-soothing, and wow, it really is profound. And yet we are a resilient culture. And if we can learn, and I love that they go to the native tribes, for wisdom of how, if you
Right.
look at how the whether you call it depression, anxiety, eating disorder, alcoholism, whatever, whatever illness or ism you're dealing with, there is a dysregulation that occurred a long time ago that set you up for this
Right.
pain.
Right.
And how the native Americans, the native tribes in other countries, the shamans they historically have understood this. And when they treat the person, it's the community, it's the whole community, right? you're
Right.
treating you're treating the person with connection, with
Yes.
support, with telling your story, with dancing, with drumming. You're using your body to help you self-regulate. You are, and like Dr. Perryman talked about, we use pharmaceuticals in our country. They used hallucinogenic mushrooms or herbs, to help the person go on a spiritual healing quest, guided by the wise shaman of the tribe, and how to help them integrate the trauma that they experienced. It's just, as I was listening to this and thinking about you and I and what some of the things we've shared, our yoga, our
Hmm.
dancing, our gardening, our connection with each other, our connection with our families,
Right.
with some of our very small, maybe closest friends,
Right.
knit relationships that we told parts of our story, and we've used dance, and we've used walking outside. How much have we talked about the need to connect with nature, the need to be using our body, to be moving our body, and to feel connected to the earth, and how that all ties into how we have just intuitively figured out how to self-regulate.
Yeah.
And hearing that in the book was just, I was having all of these, wow, that's what we're doing.
Right. Right.
As I'm listening to it, I was like, we figured this out intuitively and as part of our healing process. We certainly didn't hear about it from, our traditional, Western medicine way of
Right.
how do we integrate back to ourselves this fractured past, right? This
Hmm.
this dysregulation that we experienced because of the adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
And it just was, just some of the stories of healing that they also shared in this book were just, I cried.
Yeah.
They're just the beautiful resilience. We talk about children's resilience, and Dr. Perryman talks about that in the book. It's not resilience is not a, it's just there. It takes great effort.
Yeah.
It takes an understanding of how to reconnect with yourself, and how to involve the lower brain, to get to the cortex, right? To get to the point where you can actually focus
Right.
and learn and connect.
Right.
It's just really amazing.
It was really interesting to me because the program that I work in, that I run, is called Community Behavioral Health in my teaching, and it's based on a biopsychosocial model of wellness in the broadest possible sense, right? So we have students in there that are going to work in a wide range of health and allied health fields, including social services, um, and so a lot of what he was talking about in terms of the neurobiology when Dr. Perry was speaking um, is stuff I knew. Like, I know the impact that trauma has on the brain. Like, it disrupts the connections you're supposed to be making neurologically. if you don't
Right.
get, certain kinds of stimulation and certain kinds of, connection, warmth, empathy, that sort of thing. But there were some things in there, and I knew the disruption could be pretty severe, but there were some things in there
Mhm.
that I was even astonished by. So we talk about resilience, and resilience is, that we have a capacity to build resilience, but there are some physiological limits. Um, and there are some what psychologists would call critical periods. Like if you don't get a certain kind of stimulation within a certain developmental window, like language is the one they always talk about. You've had children who've been like kept in an attic or a closet or something, and they've been fed but not interacted with, and then discovered at a later age, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, they can learn to speak, but never the way you and I do, right? A few words. They'll make simple sentences out of a couple of words, and that's as far as they're going to get. So those critical developmental periods. But the thing that just I keep thinking about was when Dr. Perry said, if you compare kids who had 2 months, the first 2 months of their lives, they had warm, loving, dependable caregivers, and then 12 years of chaos. And then you compare kids who had 2 months of chaos. The first 2 months of their lives were chaotic and caregivers weren't dependable, warm, etc. And then 12 years of trying to, they had good caregiving and they were trying to kind of, compensate for those 2 months. They do worse than the kids with 12 years of, of chaos on top of 2 months of warmth. And so it's that just really took me aback, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard because those first 2 months are in some ways the most challenging for parents because you are sleep deprived, right? Like you you
Mhm.
need to really be on your game at a time when you're being,
Yeah.
particularly if you're a new parent, if you've never done this before, if you're a young parent, right? This is why these groups are so vulnerable. The children of these parents are so vulnerable, is that
Mhm.
they have the fewest amounts of resources to do well, to parent. And so again, this idea of the community, Dr. Perry makes a point later on that you know we're not wired to be in our homes, one caregiver taking care of children.
Right.
Like it's not, it does, we've known sociologically that that's not good for a long period of time. But now there's a lot of neurobiology to sort of back this up, right? It's not just
Yeah.
finger wagging, single mothers are bad and that sort of thing. It's like, it's, you just can't do it. You can't do a good job. That's not, human beings need that group, that connection. And I just can't do a good job. That's too strong a word. It's we're putting too much of a burden, right? We're putting too much of a burden on one or two people to be everything to a child. So it's a lot of the reason why families are so stressed now, is that we
Yeah.
expect a small nuclear unit to do what evolutionarily speaking an entire community has done. And
Exactly.
so,
In the tribe, you've got the people that help to do the cooking. You have people that would help with child care. You had hunters, gatherers. You literally and you traded off helping each other.
right, right,
And
absolutely. And so,
even in a family when you have two parents and it still is incredibly difficult to do the get up early, get the kids ready for school, then most people work, both work, then you're picking them up, you're doing after if they're involved in sports or music or any extracurricular activities, then you're coming home and doing homework and you're cooking supper and it's
and you're doing
exhausting.
laundry and you're yeah, it's
Cleaning and
it
shopping and
I
all
mean,
of
I
it.
could get on my sociological soapbox, but I talk about this all the time with my students. If we think about a couple of generations ago where you had, talking heterosexual families here, right? You had a woman at home taking care of the house and children. You had a man out earning the income, and kind of they together jointly created this family life that was livable. And as women moved into the workforce, because they had to, right? The jobs that paid really well that allowed men to um, support their families, like in manufacturing and so on, without a lot of education, have shrunk, right? They're not as big a part of the
Mhm.
sector as they used to be. And so what replaced them were lower level service jobs that don't pay as well. So women needed to go to work to help support the family. The women's movement said women should go to work to self-actualize, and the world of work hasn't changed, right? The world of work has not changed to accommodate the fact everybody who hires a worker expects that they've got somebody at home still doing all that stuff for them. And families have taken it on the chin. I mean, this has been the most dramatic social change in human history in about a 40 or 50-year time span. And everybody blames themselves. Why can't I balance it? Why can't I? Why am I not able to do it all? Um, Couples split up because they're so stressed they can't do it all. It's not a coincidence that the divorce rate rose along with women moving into the workforce. So we often think about like these traumas, these adverse experiences that's happening to other families, right? That these are things that bad people do to their children or whatever. But we really have set ourselves up as a culture now where we've created conditions that make it really hard for people to raise healthy, normal, as you said, regulated kids. It's just very, very difficult. And then you combine that with the fact that we've sort of lost track, as you said, of indigenous culture, the culture that evolutionarily we all come from, where we know how to soothe ourselves. You know, they're talking about rhythm, how important rhythm is. I love to sit in a rocker. I
Yes.
love to just sit in a rocker. You know, I've got my little grandson who's 2, and when he's really upset, I will hold him and I'll pat him or pat and rock with him. Or if you get a little baby, anybody who's taking care of infants, they'll get that baby and they'll bounce and sway
Mm-hmm.
and pat.
Yep.
And you keep trying a different rhythm, back and forth, side to side, pat the
Yep.
back, pat the butt, swing them in your arms this way, swing them in your arms this way. It's like what is it that's going to soothe you and make you feel better? And
Yep.
there's just so much packed in here, right? Then they go off and talk about
Yeah.
electronics and what that's done to our connectivity. So as you made the point early on, it's really all about a connection. It's all about the relationships that we have. And kids that are acting out are doing it because they didn't get relationally what they needed, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this is not to say that there aren't some organic biological issues that lead to behavior
Excuse me.
problems or other sorts of things, but for most people, and like you said, the stories were astonishing. Kids who kids who were had multiple problems, like the 7-year-old girl he talked about who was scraping herself with her fingernails. She was doing self-injurious behavior in the way she knew how.
Yeah.
Was acting out at school, was diagnosed ADHD, all these things, and he just went back to square one. Okay, let's go back to what she didn't get what she needed as an infant. What do infants need? Let's get her some
Excuse me.
help with regulating, the occupational therapy to help with massage. So you got that physical touch that we all need, and um, uh, some dancing, other rhythmic kinds of things.
Excuse me.
It's very complex in some ways, but it's all interwoven and it's all distilled down to the kinds and numbers of connections that we have. And so some of the stories were very sad to hear about what happened. Parts of the book I was listening to with my daughter, who's a social worker now, and so is trained as a therapist. And she and I are both listening to some of these stories. They're talking about what happened to these kids, and we both would go, oh, like hearing what's happening. But on the other hand, it's also true that if we can apply what we know about all of the, what's happening with the neurobiology and go back to some of the indigenous wisdom, as you were talking about, we actually have a lot of tools to solve these
Mm-hmm.
problems. And medications may be helpful and necessary in some circumstances, but in a lot of these cases, they're not. They're just masking the symptoms. They're not getting at the core of what happened to you, right?
Yeah. What an empowering question. I loved it.
Because
I love the title of the book,
it
and
turns the
yeah,
focus. Yeah.
absolutely. Just
Y- Yeah.
profoundly
Yes.
shifts the focus. Yeah.
Because it's
And they
always a
talked about
blame thing
trauma.
on the kid. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Right, exactly. No, you're right. It's a what's wrong with you? and 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 I think talking about the who needs the trauma change training, that and that sitting in a classroom, for 3 hours doesn't make you an expert on trauma.
Right. Right.
It's a start. It's a start, but it certainly is needed across all professions, not just
Yes.
teachers, but police officers. And, think about all the people. I was thinking about all the people in our prisons and what a setup these little boys are, who have been traumatized with adverse childhood experiences, and how and what can trigger them,
Right.
and
Right.
what can trigger them that we're not even clued in to think about that. And yeah, and I've thought about that with some of the counselors I've known in the past, that I've met briefly, that it's very clear they weren't trained in trauma at all. And I'm like, wow, you're missing probably 90% of what's going on with your patients if
There.
you're not trained in trauma.
It's yeah.
Holy smokes,
It's crazy because
how are we missing this?
no.
How can
It's
we turn a blind eye?
yeah. No. It's stunning. It's one of the things I tell my students when I teach my power and violence in the family class. It's like that's not a compulsory part of mental health curriculum, and their jaws just drop. It's like, how can you be a mental health counselor, a therapist, a social worker, and not have one class, spend one semester somewhere talking about abusive dynamics in the home,
Yeah,
right? How is screening for history of abuse, all forms of abuse, not a mandatory part of your intake when you take on a new client or a new family? It's and then of course it's generational, right? The other thing that Dr. Perry says that's really um, revolutionary is that 7-year-old girl. That's one of the stories later in the book that he talks about. Um, no, sorry, not her. It was a different one. Anyway, there's a child that he's working with, a little boy, and his mother also has been traumatized, has a history of trauma. And so in his clinic, he said, okay, when he figured out what was going on with this kid, he said, okay, we need to work with the mother too. And so it was just the two of them, was the mother and this young boy who was 10, I believe. And it just became a cycle that fed itself on an upward spiral, right? As the boy was doing
yes,
better, the mother, who was seriously depressed and dealing with her own trauma, felt like, oh, I love this boy. I want him to, like, she wants him to do well. And so seeing him improve makes her feel better about herself, makes her feel like a better mother. She's then better able to parent him and meet his needs. And so he continues to improve. And so,
yeah,
recognizing the intergenerational nature of this stuff is
absolutely,
so, so important.
is so key
Yeah.
to healing. It is.
I mean,
And so it's so missed. It is just so overlooked.
it is. It is. And, one of the things, again, to go back to that, my power and violence in the family class, this last semester when I taught it, we had somebody come in from the YWCA, which does, sexual violence, assault, domestic violence, all these sorts of services. And they've also started a new batterers program. And if you know anything about trying to work with people who have been abusing their partners, they are extremely difficult to rehabilitate. Most of it is just kind of a going through the motions sort of thing. They're court mandated to go to this training, and they
Yeah.
just have to kind of put in their time. And if they follow the rules, then they get, they check that box. But
Check. Yeah.
there's no, there's not necessarily any change in their perspective, their attitudes, their behavior, etc. And so they have created this new program where they try to meet these men, and they're all men that they're working with, even though women are capable of this behavior too. Um, they try to meet the men at their point of trauma. Because most people engage in this behavior because they learned it somewhere. Either they were abused or they
Absolutely.
watched their father abuse their mother. In fact, the latter is a
Of
greater
course.
predictor, right? Watching it,
Mm-hmm.
social learning is a greater predictor. And
Yeah.
actually having some success, right? So instead of obviously hold people accountable for what they do, right? Battering is wrong no matter what. But then saying, and what happened to you? Right?
Right.
Offering that question, that opening to them is actually pretty fruitful. So it's kind of like what we haven't talked as much about it in the podcast, but we do talk more about it in the book. we recognize our parents had their own trauma, right? We know that.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
we have
Without a
compassion
doubt.
for them. But we also hold them accountable for their choices. And
Yes.
they, and we know that in some ways they tried to do things a little differently, um, but they were not successful in breaking the cycle. And that's what we want, is we want to not just help the person who's in front of us, we want to look at that whole chain and try to
Hmm.
figure out how to up and down, right? Depending on how old that person is that you're working with, work in
Right.
both directions generationally to try to heal that trauma.
It's
The other thing that,
profound work. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
You go, girl. Well, I was just going to say the other thing I want to make sure to mention before we're done today is how the book ends, right? Oprah talks about the passing of her mother and coming to terms with what happened to her. And she ends by saying, what happened to you is your power, right?
Hmm.
As you endure and as you recover, she says, you build strength upon strength upon strength. And that just spoke to me because that's us, right? That's what we've done.
Yes.
We have built, and there's still more to go, right? We do not claim to be fully evolved human beings who are
Oh,
not
heck
still
no.
learning and growing. But we,
Absolutely.
I think I can speak for you in saying that we both have come to the point where we feel this is our power. Like this is our life's mission, is to talk
Yes.
about this, talk about what happened to us, to help other people come to grips with what happened to them, and to help them build their power.
Absolutely. And there is wisdom in living through this and learning how to self-soothe, how to heal, how to embrace all of who you are, the light, the dark, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And to actually have gratitude for where I am now today. I would not be the person I am today. And I love the person I am today.
Yeah,
And that includes everything from the past. And and there is wisdom in surviving and learning how to thrive. And it, as we've said in the past, it our experiences helped to heighten our intuitive abilities, help to heighten and grow our empathic gifts
yeah,
and compassion for others. And I wouldn't trade any of that.
I agree. I totally
I'm
agree.
very honored to have been in the place that I've been, helping others for the last few
20 some
and a half
years.
decades.
Yeah,
Yeah. I'm always very humbled and very honored when I'm in a place where I know I've really helped someone. And I it's a wonderful feeling to be able to give back.
yeah. To reflect someone's light back to them when
Hmm.
they feel broken or unseen,
Hmm.
that's big stuff.
It's powerful.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up before I start to cry.
But crying is okay.
It is okay. There's nothing wrong with crying. Um, yeah, it's good. It's good. Well, it's great
So
to
we
see you.
are It's great to see you too, and I am so appreciative of Oprah and Dr. Perry for this book and for
Yeah,
the beautiful, oh, beautiful messages of hope that it shares with all of us. So I
and for the
encourage people to.
lifetimes of work that it represents. They didn't
Oh
just
my
write this
gosh!
last week.
Oh no!
They've been doing this slog for a very long time.
Yeah. So it's full of just a lot of beautiful pearls of wisdom and healing and insights that I just think everyone should everyone should listen to it. Whether you had trauma in your life or not, to be aware of it, to recognize it in other
Yes,
people.
Yes.
is a great gift for those people. So
Because for you to respond with the appropriate question, right? What
yep,
happened to you? As opposed to what the hell's the matter with you?
yeah,
It's a big deal. It's a big deal. We've said it before, it only takes one person to reflect someone's light back to them and make a big difference in their lives.
you can change their course.
Yeah.
Never underestimate what you can do to uplift another.
Yeah.
Powerful stuff.
That's why we're here.
Yes,
It's the only reason for us all to be here.
absolutely.
Okay, so lots to think about, but still lots to learn by reading or listening to the book, so we highly encourage that. And as always, we'd love to hear what you think once you have a chance to encounter the book. So don't be afraid to reach out
Absolutely.
at any point. But in the meantime, we're signing off and we're wishing you all so much love, so much light.
And so very many blessings.
Be well, all.